Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored with Steve Taplin.
Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored, where tech leaders drop the filters and just tell it like it is. I'm your host, Steve Taplin, serial technology entrepreneur who's launched 30 companies, failed at 20 of those, but scaled 10 to success. And I've turned that roller coaster of a ride into my book, Fail Hard, Win Big. This is where I teach you how to turn failure into your biggest competitive advantage and how custom software played a key defining role in every win. Now I'm the CEO of Sciata Technology. We provide nearshore software engineering resources, helping existing teams scale all the way through doing fully managed projects. And today I have with me Michelle Tinsley, who is the CEO of Sciata. Michelle was an Intel veteran for over 25 years. She's been a CEO, a co-founder, and advisor. She's now CEO of Sciata. Michelle, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You bet. And Michelle, a fellow Arizonan, as it's like 110 degrees outside right now. At least we're in an air-conditioned home office doing this.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we had the fun monsoon activity just a few days ago, which I love. It's just very interesting to see nature's power.
That's right. Dust storms everywhere and trees falling over everywhere.
Exactly.
Michelle, if you would, give our listeners a couple-minute overview of the journey of your career.
Sounds good. So funny enough, I actually began in a non-technical role at Intel out of college. I progressed through 14 years of different positions and ended up in a role in the Internet of Things group, which is kind of a backwater area of Intel because it was taking the main CPUs and processors built for data center and PC and putting them into the very interesting use cases like deeply embedded healthcare equipment or retail. And what I did is I fell in love with that business and decided I wanted to move into the business role. So I became a general manager and then eventually did product and lastly sales. But after 26 years, I decided I'd had it with corporate America. I was ready to be more entrepreneurial. I had been an angel investor at that point for 4.5 years. And I moved into the startup space and I was in leadership roles, founding 2 different startups here in Arizona. Basically learned a ton about how do you make stuff happen? How do you take an idea, turn it into strategy, turn it into actual product and meet your customers' needs and learn all the different things that you just never predicted would come up. But after 6.5 years in that space, I decided now I want to kind of go for the Goldilocks in the middle. So I'm actually working in private equity. I first made an investment in Saeda and then came in as CEO 3 months later to essentially grow this business from where it's at today. My charter is to grow at 25x in 4 years. So the only way you do that is both with organic growth of our existing clients and adding new clients, but then also doing M&A. And so obviously it's kind of the day job is run the company. The night job is go do M&A. And it's a huge learning experience for me and I'm having a lot of fun.
So what was the tipping point after 26 years at Intel that you can't take the corporate world anymore and your entrepreneurial bug had to come out?
Well, as we discussed earlier, I did invested in a really great company called Campus Logic in Chandler. And basically that CEO at the time, Greg Scoresby, was coming in and giving us updates about how great his company was growing, the traction he was getting. And honestly, I had to admit, I was jealous. I was like, I look at what I've done in the last 2 years since I invested in that company. I've reorged 5 times. I've laid people off. And once you put that on your resume and say you can do it, it's not something that's super rewarding that you want to have on there 8 times, So for me, I'm a very high utility leader. I want to build and do real things. I want to see real growth and value to our clients. And I'm not excited about the giant job title or, which is, again, if I stayed in corporate America, that's what I should be aiming for is that VP title or, move to Santa Clara headquarters and have their super exciting high visibility role. And I was like, to me, it's less about that and more like what am I personally doing to grow this business and help our clients?
I love it. And so you hit the startup scene, you've been an investor, you invested in Sciata and then became the CEO. That's a pretty cool route. Tell us more about Sciata and what you guys do and the nature of the name.
Sure. So Saeda was branded, it basically got acquired by private equity, Balanced Capital Partners in 2019. And when Jerry came in, he wanted to rebrand from the startup name, which was Tech Mileage Solutions, because when they first got started, they were doing a lot of work in the space with logistics, routing, mobile apps that had a high propensity to need like geotagging and map interface. Obviously, we're much larger now. We're doing a lot more variety of work. And so it didn't really grok with some of our key clients who are in the financial services sector. So he rebranded the company to Sciata, thinking it's the blending of science and data. And that by bringing these two together, you can do truly transformative work. So the company's initial wins and kind of domain expertise is in custom software solutions, mobile apps, web apps, even robotic process automation, anything that kind of helped our clients really pull together systems that they had, do a lot of data work. But that data work then led to large scale AI implementations. So we as a company have already done 25 different predictive models, where we deliver the model to our client. They then run it for years to come, and it transforms the way their company operates. So that's what I just love. We've actually had 2 clients since take their IP, kind of crack the code and stand up another instance of the IP as its own company, because it's adding so much value. And the one that's very public is we did work for Bridger, and then it stood it up as Truco's company. So what that's doing is it's detecting the false alarms on oil and gas pipelines. They were spending, 90% of the people going out and fixing a gas leak that was reported on the pipeline, it was a false alarm. And so that literally paid for itself very quickly, but then they looked at it and went, this is an issue in the entire industry. Why not monetize on this for the entire industry? So that's where I go. We do really the needle moving tech. Today, we don't fix any blue screens of death. And where we're going is more edge AI, which is, again, to my wheelhouse, the Internet of Things, looking at going, these large language models are great and they have a need, but there's also going to be different models that take in the sensor data at the edge and make those decisions in real time in settings like utilities, manufacturing, oil and gas.
Awesome. Tell us about some current projects you're working on.
So we basically have one client where we're going in to do some predictive modeling for them on how to do revenue cycle management better. So this is in the healthcare industry. They have huge staff of people that are manually trying to go out and recode, format the accounts receivable on behalf of their clients, and then get higher collections from the payers, like, say, Blue Cross Blue Shield. And what we're seeing with our initial data insights is that they could be improving this to the order of 10 million or more of client revenue recovered. So again, really good needle moving stuff. We have another project underway where we just gathered a bunch of requirements for a large company in Scottsdale to go redo their ERP that they're running on that sends out work orders daily to their technicians. So we do anything in between, it's again, really understanding that client. And because we're in this transformation space, it's largely a relationship sale. It's one of these where, yes, I'll drive thought leadership, but then I'll meet people, I'll get to know them. They'll hopefully learn and trust, what we can do, share our case studies, and then use us as a client. But where we come in different from somebody like a Deloitte or Accenture is we're not going to charge you a $10 million retainer. We come in and we do the initial project as a requirements gathering or a POC, and then we can scale up from there as they see the value.
Now talk about your AI Get Started workshops.
Yeah, so essentially, we've just crafted a new offering, which is how do we go in there and first have you as a company send us your business strategy for the company, high level, send us also your tech stack. We then come in and have a 4-hour workshop with, say, 5 to 10 people. It could be a part of your team if you're a very large company, or if it's a smaller firm, it might be the leadership team. But we basically come in with that pre-knowledge, and we bring in the right team to consult on that domain experience, your industry, your type of tech stack, and then say, based on the pain points and use cases you're seeing in your company, here is a roadmap of where your company could deploy AI. But let's be really focused and specific here. Say pick 2 or 3 of the highest value use cases. And now your leadership team is going to go start deploying the solutions there, which there's a lot of third party off the shelf. This is not we have to invent it all from Saeda, but we're here to be your digital Sherpas, and help you discover what tools are out there. Again, based on your use case in your industry, go deploy them, but you may not be into systems deployment as something you've done 20 times over. So we will follow that up with coaching for a month to 2 months to kind of help you get the value out of those tools that you're deploying. And we look at it then and go, hopefully by showing you with that type of exercise, we're now a trusted partner. You can come back, and when you do need API work or data cleanup work, we're here to help you with that effort as well.
Excellent. Tell us about your software engineering team and how you guys run things, whether it's on-site, hybrid, remote.
Yeah, so our workers are all US based. So we will go on site as our client needs it. We have, again, some very large Fortune 1000 clients that they want these software developers in their office 3 days a week. I usually coach our clients who don't want to require 5 days a week for a software developer because that's just not their mojo. And what happens is when you get somebody who's willing to do that, they may not be the top candidate in the bell curve of humanity. And so basically, you do want to allow them some flexibility to work from home. And the great thing with software development is you can always see the productivity. You see people checking in code into Jira or whatever system they're using to manage the workload, and you can see if they're producing or not. You can also see from QA tools the quality of what they're producing. So let's again use modern day tools and allow more of that hybrid structure. For consulting engagements, we usually put the team together, and it's again much more driven by the exact skill sets that we need. And we will balance very senior people on the team with also some newer resources just to again kind of blend the rate on what that consulting project will entail.
Awesome. What's Michelle, you've spent two plus decades at one of the largest tech companies out there. You've now been in the startup scene. You're CEO of a software company. What are some brutal lessons you wish you would have learned earlier?
I look at it and go, it's the failure that you're talking about. It's like, on one hand, you may go, ouch, that experience was so painful. I've got battle scars. But if you can have the mentality to stand back and go, wait a minute, what did I learn from this? And, there's this worry when you're more junior in your career of like, oh, what if I make a misstep? What if I take a wrong, like while I was at Intel, what if I take a wrong rotation? Or what if, it's the wrong time to leave? If you second guess yourself all the time, you're never going to take the amazing opportunities that come your way. As we were talking earlier, think of it more the mentality of I'm a surfer and I need to be able to see when the waves are coming at me and know how to jump on the board and get on that, catch that peak and ride it. And it may lead to a wipeout, but you know what? I'm going to ride the next one better than if I just sat on the beach watching waves all day. And so, yeah, I do a lot of times.
I love it. That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
As a tech leader, what are some of the biggest challenges you're facing right now?
I've seen a ton of hesitancy from clients. They go, what you're saying totally makes sense. And yes, we know we really need this, but given economic uncertainty and there's just a lot of changes going on right now, we think we should just put a pin in this for 3 months or 6 months. And it's just like pervading. I've heard unverifiable stats, like for every 3 months you wait on deploying AI, you're 6 months behind your competition. But, I just look at it and go, that we're seeing too a lot of days where people are doing a ton of experimentation. Oh, just turn on Copilot, which again, it's easy. And again, better to do that than do nothing. But without a strategy and a real intent around where the value you're going to get, it's going to end up being the latest great example of AI hype. And, oh, we're not getting any value out of it. And there are some potential gotchas. Like even with Copilot, you need to be aware that when you turn that on, it's going to look at whatever governing permissions you have for SharePoint. So if you're a smaller firm, you may have open SharePoint access at the company. That means it's going to be pulling from all sorts of folders and files that your employees may have never looked at. And now all of a sudden your intern's getting served up, payroll data or, whatever else it might be out there. So you do need to even think about governance and data structures, even when it's something as simple as like turning on a $30 Copilot license.
So Michelle, what are you seeing from a software industry perspective? Obviously, generative AI, agentic has hit hard over the past 2+ years, and there was a lot of hype. And the thought was you're not going to need software developers anymore. And now fast forward where I think reality is setting in, where the hype is dying down a little, and we're starting to see where AI helps, where it doesn't, in all areas, but also from a software engineering perspective. What's your viewpoint on it?
I think there are cycles of learning. And I think, again, the first wave of AI was more these big predictive models for large corporations that had a ton of data. The beauty of generative AI is it's democratizing the access to that power by using these kind of off-the-shelf models and allowing smaller and mid-sized companies that will never have 10 million bits of data to tap into some of these pre-made models. That said, I think the human adoption curve is not catching up to the speed at which some of these models are cranking out new revs all the time. And as you see it, it's like OpenAI just did a thing where they said, hey, we're going to actually back off. We're going to take some of our really brilliant, amazing PhD type data scientists and put them towards deployment with customers, because we can slow down a little bit on the next rev of the model because people can't drink it fast enough. But funny enough, if you want to work with them, that's a $10 million retainer just to sign a
Yes.
contract with them. So I look at that and go, that's a very rare echelon of client that's willing to kind of just bet the farm on that and say, sure, I'll give you a blank check for 10 million. Let's go get working on that. Where most companies today are really value driven and looking at it going like agentic, it will happen someday, but there needs to again be a lot more thought around the governance and the ethics around that of like, I remember back to my procurement days when we were doing auto ordering, and you had to set limits on higher and lower limits on what you want that individual SKU to be purchased at. It's kind of the same thing with agentic AI. How do you put the governors in above and below to make sure that the thing doesn't go off on a tangent on its own, and before you know it, you've either spent way more than you had budgeted or consumed a bunch of your cash flow or signed up for contracts you didn't want to sign up for. So there still needs to be a lot of oversight there. And again, I think that's where the humans, our brains are really flexible. They're actually quite amazing. Hopefully what people see is the careers in the future. We're going to have these super powerful tools and we're going to get to do the fun, creative, seeing patterns across different data sets that would be very hard for a model to try to predict that a human can still do.
So MIT came out with a report earlier this month stating that 95% of generative AI pilots at companies were failing, and their definition of failing was negative or zero ROI. Why do you think that is?
I see it firsthand as well. I guess I would concur with their assessment. They've just got good data on it. I think it's much like a capability like when the internet browsers came out. I remember again being at Intel at the time, them saying we're going to lock it down. You're not going to be able to access a browser at work. And nowadays you look at it and go like, how the heck could I do my job without that? But you have to first find those meaningful use cases and again really think through where's the business value in this? And if it means, great, I got, 30 more minutes freed up because I used generative AI tools to assist me. How is that employee then seeing the value of that and turning that into something that drives value for the company? Or is it I'm watching more cat videos? And so, so you just go, we've got to kind of put some of these things in place to say, my approach is go with a company to say, let's do fewer pilots, less experimentation. Don't throw 10 things into the wall and hope one of them sticks. Let's really get thoughtful about this and look at where we could drive some real value.
Remember way back when the cloud was this amazing thing and it was mystical to everybody and oh my gosh, the cloud and what is it? And I think a lot of people still think that way. And those of us who've been in the industry just kind of laugh. You realize the cloud is just somebody else's data center, not your own.
But by the way, we still do a ton of work on .NET. We still do a lot of work with clients that have on-prem servers that still believe that by being on-prem, they're more secure. And I'm just like, wow, okay, well, that's, again, a commonly held belief amongst some. And it's, again, maybe a power thing. So again, I think a lot of what's holding us back is the human adoption aspect of this. So I always say, again, think about how do you bring your workers along and get them motivated to grab and latch onto these new AI things and see it as a positive versus feeling threatened that you're not going to need me tomorrow. So why do I want to adopt this?
I like it. So what are your thoughts on there's this buzzword that's been going around Silicon Valley that was adapted from some Asian countries called the 996 culture, and tech companies are embracing this. And 996 mean work 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week, and the job you will be in the office 6 days a week, and the pay is not great either, but they promise equity. And there's this grind culture of you got to get ahead, and that's how you do it. What are your thoughts on that?
It personally would not work for me. And I go, while I'm Gen X, so I'm not, a younger Gen Z. From what I see from my kid who is a Gen Z, I don't know how much that's going to work for them either. I do see that there are kids that still have the hustle and the chutzpah, but I do see a lot of them wanting more of this balance where they want to have hobbies. They want to do things outside of a day job. And so I think those cultures are going to find it hard to find the tech workers. Now, again, you're a founder. Amen. You're going to put in more than 996. I mean, having been a startup founder, but that was to me a conscious choice to do that and then have the founder's level of equity. Sadly, I think on some of these, you're just employee number 20,000. You're not going to get needle moving transformative wealth to your home with that kind of employee equity. So yeah, it's one of these where I think people just have to make their trade-offs, but I worry about burnoff. I literally just saw an article that there's a new thing called micro retirements where people are quitting their jobs and taking 6 months off to not work at all. And, I'm like, well, at Intel, that was like a sabbatical. Because yeah, Intel was pretty intense. I joined in 92 and they're, back, no laptops. So I'm really dating myself. But as a financial analyst to close the books, I was in on New Year's Day. I was in on, the important dates because you couldn't bring the computer home and still be in the Intel firewall and get your job done. So, I look at that and go, we got away from that because it was really disgruntling to employees, and people, in our case, moved out of finance into other parts of the company that provided better balance.
After spending the amount of time at Intel that you did and then entering the startup world, what were some of the biggest cultural shocks to you or changes from going from the corporate environment to the entrepreneurial?
I think it's you get coached, especially because I'd made it to an executive level at Intel, that things really need to be buttoned up, polished, like you would never, quote stuff on behalf of the company or do this in a way that was unprofessional. Sometimes in a startup, you got to experiment and you're like, really? Our initial website's going to look like that? Or that's, we don't have 50K to go do a giant set of collaterals, for sales. The initial sales to get into first revenue at a startup are always founder driven. And so these are literally going to be either without PowerPoint, just a conversation with a prospect, or I have very skeletal PowerPoint that I created myself, and I'm not a graphics design person, So it's being okay with a little bit of that, like the enemy of great is good, so like the enemy of good is great. So basically, don't try to be over perfected with these things. Get into the revenue, learn from your customers, because they're going to lean in on what's working and they're going to tell you what doesn't work. But I've seen too many startups, especially from an investor angle, that they dilly dally to get to market, and here they are 2 years later and they still don't have revenue yet because they're still waiting for the next generation. And you're like, you've done 3 iterations on product. What the heck's going on here? Get into revenue. Let your customers tell you what's working.
I think that's where the biggest mistake we see in the software industry is analysis paralysis, and not doing what they should be doing is getting feedback each step of the way from the actual clients and the end users to make sure you're modeling your product around them.
Yeah, and it's the endless requirements gathering. You can always gather more requirements and be more detailed, but you're like, at some point, I don't have a crystal ball. I can't predict the tools even Saeda will be using 4 years from now. What I can set is a technical direction and then say, let's spend our time on the next 6 months setting a clear roadmap, and then we'll keep revisiting it because we're going to keep learning. There's going to be new innovations, new tools on the scene, and we can rapidly iterate because that's what we got to do, is be resilient.
Awesome. Michelle, thank you so much for getting uncensored with us today. Hats off to you. After a long, successful corporate career in the tech space, you decided to jump to the dark side, the entrepreneurial, the startup space, and it sounds like you're kicking butt and taking names. Before we wrap, Michelle, what's your no BS advice for other tech leaders out there trying to build, scale, or just survive?
I think it starts with build a real skill set of competency of what you know, but then believe in yourself. So many tech folks I see, they have very low self-confidence and they don't believe that they can go. Even my own husband, he was into electrical engineering and now he's working in the operations in a SaaS startup. And he would have told you he couldn't do that because it's software and he's used to chips. And I'm like, the problem solving translates, believe in yourself.
Awesome. Love it. Thank you so much, Michelle. That's it for this episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. I'm Steve Taplin. If you enjoyed the show, go ahead and hit subscribe. If you didn't like it, well, share it with your competitors then. Might be the edge they're looking for. Remember to fail hard, win big, and always build what matters. See you next time.
That's a wrap. Another great episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. Thank you guys so much for listening. I really appreciate it. It's a lot of fun doing this show. I love talking with great tech leaders. As a side note, if you're interested, check out my new book, Fail Hard, Win Big. This is the story of how I built 30 companies, failed on 20, and turned 10 into multi-million-dollar wins. The common thread with all of them was custom software. Also, if you need software development help out there, my company, Sciata Technology, we deliver world-class software development engineers out of Latin America. We have a solid track record of helping companies launch better products and faster. Thanks again for listening. Appreciate it and appreciate you.